Good morning, everybody. My name is Maisha Kramer, and I'm a mom and a doula living and practicing in NYC. I've been attending births for over 20 years as a doula and occasionally as a birth assistant as well. Today's guest is the amazing midwife and friend, auntie, bestie, Marcy Tardio, who is a home birth midwife, now retired, who practiced and is from NYC. Hey there, Marcy. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. So let's get right into it. Please introduce yourself, your name, what you do, where are you from?
Marcy Tardio, sometimes known as Marcy Perlman Tardio. Where am I from? It's a lot. From the Bronx, 25 years in Brooklyn, West Virginia, San Francisco, Boston, back to New York. And now I'm in New Jersey the last 4.5 years. Orange, New Jersey. There's
Awesome.
the orange.
Awesome.
And that's
Yeah,
where I am now. Yes.
awesome. I love it. So I want to explain what a midwife is. And you are obviously oh, the M's always get me. Do you know that? Like, I stutter the words on M's, D's, B's, and L's, and I became a doula. Oh, and W's, who works with women, mothers, birth, labor. So annoying. Anyway,
Did it beautifully.
yeah, whatever. It doesn't work when I wanted to. Okay, so what is a, see, now I can't say it. What is a
Midwife.
midwife? Yeah.
Well, the word midwife means with woman, which I think it's exactly, that is a great explanation. Okay. So at this really vulnerable time of life for women, midwives have a lot of avenues to become a midwife. I happen to be a nurse midwife, so I became a registered nurse first and then a midwife. And the reason I chose that was because I was a single mother on welfare, and I thought I need to have a way of earning a living. And so I chose not to be an apprentice trained midwife. So, but of course, I did my training 1987, 88. So it was a different time and different approaches to how one would become a midwife.
Okay, and you did home births, which is amazing. And a lot of people, they ask me, like, how does that work? Who comes to a home birth? Is there a physician? Is there an obstetrician? I'm like, no. So who can attend a home birth? And what are their qualifications? And what care does a home birth person that you're going to describe provide?
Well, I'll get both real and crunchy granola here.
Uh-huh.
Midwives is the second oldest profession. So I think traditional training through the millennia have been through apprenticeship. One passed it on to the elder passed it on to the younger, and on and on and on. I'll give a little story. My grandmother told me when I told her I was going to become a midwife, she said, "You're following family tradition." Her aunt was the town midwife. The aunt's daughter went to school to become a midwife. But you always knew when there was a complicated birth because the daughter would bring the mother. So now we have new qualifications based on rules, regulation, a healthcare system, where you have to take exams, you have to pass boards, things like that. But that is historically not how it was. However, there are still people who may not have the same credentials as another, and as a woman, you may want to ask what her training was, and you may not even understand what that is. You then might want to understand what her experience is. And what I find in the home birth community is because the healthcare system is so unfriendly that women choose a midwife who they like. They just like them. They resonate with them, but that doesn't mean they are experienced. It doesn't mean they've had to deal with difficult situations and figure out how to make it work so mother and baby are safe. It doesn't mean that they haven't had complications that maybe they shouldn't have had. So I think the idea of just choosing someone you like is something that I see a lot of. And I think there needs to be a little bit more care about how you choose the person. That being said, qualified midwife can be the person who does all your prenatal care, your delivery, your evaluating the baby's wellness at birth and postpartum, and you may not ever have to see a doctor.
What if you tear at your home birth?
Midwives have that training to do the repair. There may be more complicated tears, like a 4th degree, that some midwives have learned, but in our training, that usually isn't what we're trained with. So on occasion, if there's a deep through the rectum tear, which is not very common, that may require a transfer. That's
And
it.
what about the baby's birth certificate, social security card, all those things? Like, who checks the baby? Do you have to see a pediatrician?
Well, the two separate things. The midwife does the birth certificate. And on the birth certificate, there's a place to check off social security card. So both of those are, submitted at the same time by the midwife. Yes, after you have a baby, you should go to your you should, also choose a pediatrician that you feel has some philosophy similar to yours, that is supportive of your belief in mothering and raising a child. As a home birth midwife, I do not want someone to go the next day to their pediatrician because I don't want them getting out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually say by a week's time, go to the pediatrician, and in the earlier stages, I evaluate the baby and, come back and see that mother and baby are doing well. And the midwife has the capacity to do that, evaluate wellness. And if there's a complication, to say, we need you to go to the pediatrician now.
Right. So there are different midwifery certifications, right? You have CNM, CM, CPM. I think that's all of them, right? Are there any more?
That's as far as I understand, yeah.
Right. I think it depends on your state, which ones can support a home birth, right?
There are midwives who are in states that say they don't want home births and they do it anyway. That's why I say you could put all the midwives in jail, but home birth is still going to happen,
Right.
Because you can't mandate how women want to have their babies.
Mm-hmm. And
I've heard, I'm not fully aware of it, but certified professional midwives, which is relatively new. It used to be lay midwives, and then the lay midwifery community developed a way to evaluate, to have evaluation of knowledge and having a test that note that affirms that you're able to be qualified. But I understand that there are states where CPMs can work and that they're not allowed to use Pitocin, or they're, things that allow for safety. So those type of laws, I don't know if they exist now, but at one point it was. And if you're going to let someone legally be a midwife and not let her legally have things that allow for that help with safety, then these governmental policy, I don't know the right word, the people who
Mm,
mandate these things are making a grave mistake.
right. So, and what was midwifery training for you? How did that look?
Well, I was kind of grandmothered in two ways. When I became a nurse, I got an associate's degree and my RN. Later on, it became bachelor's minimum, but I was grandmothered in. We take the same exams,
Mm,
so I think people with bachelor's degrees just learn more about leadership roles and things like that, but maybe some research. But as far as being practical, registered nurses, not different. And I got a certificate in midwifery, passed my ACNM boards, so I'm a licensed midwife, but now it's master's minimum. But when I trained, that was allowable, and I was grandmothered in.
right. And how many years did you practice as a midwife?
31 years.
Wow. Where did you first start?
Well, I trained in San Francisco at the San Francisco General Hospital, which was affiliated with UCSF. It was a different crew of midwifery instructors, because most of my teachers came out of home birth back when they were lay midwives, back in the early, the late 60s, early 70s of doing home birth. So it was mostly apprenticeship. So I was really fortunate to have people who believe that way. But at the same time, when I trained at the General, the way that obstetricians practiced was a much more whole, I won't say holistic, but the way that obstetrics should be, low C-section rates, total support of midwives, real collaboration. So my program was a year. And by 88, I was a midwife. And then I practiced in hospital for 5 years in the Boston area, Quincy Hospital for anyone who's from the Boston area. And then I moved to back to New York after over 20 years away. And I worked at the very first of all birth centers, the maternity center, which I felt very blessed to have been part of. And I was there for 3 years before they moved to Elizabeth Seton. And I did the first birth at Elizabeth Seton. So when we weren't even fully unpacked. So I worked for, I guess, about 6 years in birth center before I opened my home birth practice. And I opened my home birth practice, I think, while I was at a birth center. I kind of like crossed over there. And I did home birth for about 23 years.
And how many babies did you catch? I know you don't have an exact count, but like,
About 1,000.
Amazing.
It's interesting because people I went to school with who worked in hospitals in our years of experience, they delivered 5,000-6,000 babies. But when you do home birth and you're with one-on-one, you may not have the same numbers as a hospital midwife, but the hospital midwife goes from room to room to room, catching. And when you're doing home birth, you're less, it's more one-on-one and less higher numbers. So.
Also, do you want to explain a thing so obstetricians, they say they deliver babies, and midwives don't use that terminology.
Well, when you say you deliver a baby, you give all the props to yourself. We say that the woman delivers the baby and we catch.
Mm-hmm.
So especially home birth midwives like to call themselves baby catchers.
Yep. Okay. What I got? Why did you become a midwife?
Well, I'll try to make this fast.
Sure.
I credit the first interest in birth, and I feel very blessed for this. My mother only told me wonderful stories about childbirth. And I never had a feeling of fear around childbirth because she said it was the most wonderful experience she ever had. And so I started with that. Then, when I was a young hippie living on a communal farm in West Virginia, from age 17 to 19, I saw my first birth there. And the woman invited the members of the farm to her birth, which was in the log cabin, delivered by the father of the baby. I think they were all of 23 years old. But the father was a very responsible individual, and I'm sure he read everything there was to read. And at the birth, the feet came out first.
Hmm.
And I'm sure nobody was prepared for that.
Mm-hmm.
But the dad did a really good job. And the mom happened to be quite a big woman, maybe 5'9", 5'10". And, so there was the baby came out pretty easily, but but then the baby didn't cry right away and needed a little stimulation. And we were all holding our breaths. No one really knew what to do. Someone went running for the neighbor in the next farm who was a nurse's aide at the local hospital. And she came running in and starts stimulating the baby and flicking its feet. And when we had the first cry, we all took our first breath with that baby.
Mm-hmm.
That was in December of 1971.
Ooh.
So that was very impactful for me as a 19-year-old girl. So 2 years later, I gave birth to my son. And first I started with a female doctor who was as remote as any OB that you might think of. And by the time I was like 6 months pregnant, I found a home birth practice, which were family practice doctors, which if anyone has read Suzanne Arm's Immaculate Deception, she has a little chapter on 3 country doctors, and that's who I went to.
Mm.
They were from San Francisco, an hour-and-a-half drive. And I didn't drive yet. I was still a New Yorker. And the woman I babysat for her 4 children, she drove me there. And I was very fortunate because when I made my first phone call, they said came to San Francisco. And by the time I came to the appointment, they said they stopped going to San Francisco, but they would honor me because they told me they would. So I had a family doctor, as my birth attendant for my older son, who's now 51.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that first birth that I saw was instrumental in my having a home birth.
Wow.
And it's interesting, and I will put this as a little asterisk. Like, I once had someone call me and say, I'd like you to help me have my beautiful home birth. And I said to her, sometimes you have to change your idea of what beauty looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the films that have been out, I don't know now, but out about home birth, make it seem like it's a very like everything is beautiful and calm and everything like that. I I can't believe that as a 20-year-old, I thought very seriously about how will I feel if there's something that happens that is not good and choosing a home birth. And I said, I think birth mostly works, and I accept the responsibility if something happens. And I do think that not enough people wrestle with that. They want, there's a little bit of magical thinking in home birth. And I think people have to really be accountable on that accountability and making the choice, because you're not in a hospital. And if something dramatic happened, let me qualify this. If something that dramatic happens, even if you're in a hospital, it can be not enough time.
Right.
So, but I do think that a couple should be accountable for their choice, understanding what they're doing, and then go for it, but still have these hard conversations.
I love that. I love that. So that kind of, you started answering my next question of what, there's two. So why do people choose home birth, and what do people need to know about choosing home birth?
I think that people that choose home birth they believe that birth is a natural thing. They trust their bodies. They don't want a lot of input that's negative, that makes them doubt, that takes over and dominates them. Like the medical establishment can do, or just hospital culture can do, anywhere from you saying, no, I really don't want an IV, to them talking about how you might kill your baby, and you're in a very vulnerable situation where you shouldn't have to be in a position to fight. So, but it's very easy to impress on someone in the hospital, we want you to do what we want you to do, and make you feel guilty, unsure.
Mm-hmm.
So I think home birth people want to stay away from that, which is wonderful. I choosing home birth is not a guarantee for a home birth. That's something that I do want to say, because part of having a skilled midwife is being able to know when things are going fine and when we need to be in another situation, in another environment. So, although most, births that start at home end at home in a beautiful way, but sometimes we do need to transfer. And if we do need to transfer, you hope that there's a midwife who has the knowledge to be able to distinguish. I'm skipping over, but I'm talking about boundaries now. You need a midwife who knows her boundaries. She knows in order to keep you and the baby safe, she has to know what her skill set is, what her experience is, and have a clear sense of boundaries. A newer midwife, more so perhaps than someone who's been through a lot of different experiences. My biggest fear is that newer midwives are not being conscious of their boundaries, are not approaching the work with humility. And I think you have to have a lot of humility to do this work. Like when you go swimming in the ocean, and it looks nice and still, and you realize this is beautiful, and you pray, I'm grateful for this, but you know that that ocean has the power of a tsunami as well. So, humility is a really important thing. And for a midwife to know, to have very clear boundaries for herself. And that may change with time, but I think it's really extremely important.
Who can have a home birth?
I think you have to basically be fundamentally healthy, with no major medical issues that would require attention during the pregnancy and birth. So someone who's just basically healthy, has a good nutrition, is fairly physically embodied and mindful. And if you are an insulin dependent diabetic since childhood, probably not. Because you have two things. You may be able to have a lovely birth, but you also need someone to manage your insulin. Someone who's had a transverse, not a vertical incision on their uterus. So, and different midwives may have different feelings about these things, but in generally, I think that a healthy woman can have a home birth.
And what are the common things that would disqualify?
Well, I said certain medical problems, but I
Right.
would also say, in my opinion, if you have a non-supportive partner, I consider that a contraindication to home birth. I believe I would like to support the woman, but if you have negative energy from your partner, that's always feeling like this is dangerous, this is a problem, this is, it's going to put a block to your birth. And maybe it's also going to be unsafe for the midwife because, anything, she tears and in a way that makes her uncomfortable, and they're more apt to sue. Yeah, I told you so, So I think you have to have a couple that's on board together. That's
Right.
really important.
How about her age? Too young, too old?
Some of the issues around age, what we don't remember is that some of the problems can get ruled out during the pregnancy. So if a 40-year-old woman is pregnant and there's a higher chance of a baby with Down syndrome, and she has some of the testing that's available and that there's no Down syndrome, that's ruled out. That's no longer an issue that is prevalent. The 40 from 50 years ago and the 40 now is quite different. You have really fit and healthy 40-year-old women. In the books, they say there's more of a chance of high blood pressure, but you're going to be watching that. So you can start with a normal blood pressure, woman, if with any woman of any age, it could be 25-year-old woman or a 40-year-old woman that all of a sudden starts having high blood pressure. You've got to attend to that reality and figure out, is this just a momentary thing that doesn't repeat itself, or is there really some preeclampsia that's beginning? And then, I think this is one of the areas that I think boundaries are important. And there's not an absolute boundary, but I think that there may be midwives who have the capacity to be mindful of someone, especially if it's not severe, a severe case, let's say a preeclampsia, and be watchful of her. A less experienced midwife maybe should consider transferring.
Do you want to just quickly explain what is preeclampsia?
Well, it's a metabolic uh, illness of pregnancy that doesn't happen to everyone, but it's a kind of a cluster of symptoms: high blood pressure, protein in the urine, swelling. The worst case scenario is seizures. So it's not benign by any means, but there are very borderline cases that never get very severe. So I'm not here to tell you how to manage this. This is something that comes with your experience, but wasn't the question who should have a home birth?
Yeah, and like who qualifies, who disqualifies, like aging in, aging out, and then
I don't think age alone is the thing. Look at the woman, look at the individual. Don't just look at the age. You know, age alone is not, you know, this what is it called now? For older women,
geriatric,
geriatric.
geriatric
You know,
pregnant,
that puts such a negative thing on a woman and age. It's very ageist.
right? And also advanced maternal age,
Well,
AMA.
that's more observing. That may be true. You know, you could say advanced maternal age, but
That's not geriatric, right?
yeah. But does advanced maternal age always mean problem? Not necessarily. Look at the woman, look at the whole picture.
Right. What happens to someone who chooses a home birth and they don't deliver by their due date? Which, is a hidden question in there, by their due date.
Due date is a ballpark kind of as close as we can think the baby is kind of ready, but there's like the the rings around Saturn. You know, you've got your due date, but there can be a wide circle of when the baby might come. The thing is, a lot of the rules and regulations are based on statistics, and the statistics are done in hospitals where births are managed, controlled and managed. They say, you know, there's a little truth. There's more of a chance of a problem when you're very late, like decreased fluid that can impact how the baby during the stress of labor. But I'll give you a story to go with that. So my niece was in a mixed midwife and doctor practice. I think she's could be 40, maybe late 30s. And she nowadays they're doing sonograms much more often, and women think that's normal. It wasn't when I was coming up. But now, if you look for a problem, you're going to find a problem. So she had a sonogram. They said, inadequate fluid, we need to induce you. She came to the hospital. She no longer had midwives. She had the doctors. She had a 2-day induction. The baby was doing great. There wasn't much change in her cervix. They wanted to break her water. She said, if you break my water and I don't go into labor in a certain amount of time, you're going to do a C-section. They said, yes. She said, can we do another sonogram and check how the fluid's doing? They said, no, we made our plan and we're sticking to it. So she called me and said, is it too late for a home birth? I said, I don't know, let me check. And I called one or two midwives, and one of them said, put her in touch with me, and they had their talk. And my niece had a powwow with her mom and her husband, who were both there. And she even asked the doctors, if I leave, will you take me back if there's a need? And they said, don't worry about it. And she left. She went to this home birth midwife. She sent her for another sonogram. She had more than adequate fluid. And a week later, she had a home birth of a healthy baby.
Wow.
So there's not a lot of absolutes.
Mm-hmm.
There may be a few, but not a lot. Things like decreased fluid and a induction that went on for 2 days, and then she elected not to have her water broken, and we did her sonogram. That wasn't supported by the doctors, but she had a lot more fluid. And then everything turned out, well. So the problem is in the lay community. Women, they hear things. They hear things from other women. They hear things from doctors. They hear things and they think it's an absolute, and it's not. So there is more nuance.
Yes. How about someone who's had a cesarean before? Can they have a home birth?
Depends on the midwife. Depends on the incision. Mostly, in my experience, I have not had a problem, but I have heard of people who've had problems with not necessarily a major ruptured uterus, but something that, where they transferred and they said, it's good we're able to get there. So for that reason, I think a midwife needs to be thoughtful about how comfortable she is with having a previous surgical birth. Mostly with one previous C-section, you're not going to have a lot of, again, no absolute. You're not going to have an absolute of a ruptured uterus. But I think it is midwife to midwife for her to think, am I comfortable with this? I did many VBACs. And then I heard about a kind of an iffy situation through the home birth world. And then I stopped because I said, I don't want to take that chance.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone came to me and said they wanted it. And we talked about it, and I talked about accountability, and I asked them to write me a letter about their understanding and their, feeling that their trust in their body and their understanding that things can happen and all of these things. And we signed it together, and I did her birth, and she had a beautiful, feedback. So that's me. But, there are some who say, yes, they will, and some that will take people who've had 2 previous C-sections, 3, 4. And I think you can't minimize risk because you're a home birth midwife. You really have to be very considerate and thoughtful, because what one midwife decides by going outside of the norms impacts all midwives in home birth.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, you have to know, I'll take someone with 1 previous C-section, but not with 4 previous C-sections. You have to have a sense of your own boundaries and potential risks and who you're dealing with, who your client is, and how realistic are the risks. I think sometimes people go into home birth thinking birth is natural, therefore, everything goes in home birth. And there's a lot of natural plants that are poisonous plants. It's natural. So we do have to take into consideration these things.
Right. Midwives bring a ton of gear into a birth. Would you like to share what are the supplies that you
Oh,
bring?
you know, um, I'm not going to tell you exactly because I don't think that the lay community really knows what these supplies mean.
Mhm.
But I will say that there should be, we bring things to keep women safe. We bring things that can repair a tear. We bring IVs for hydration. We bring the ability to listen to a baby's heartbeat and blood pressure. Some people I've heard say, well, I'm thinking of going to a birth center instead of home birth because they think that a freestanding birth center is somewhere in between home birth and hospital. And that is an error of understanding because everything a home birth midwife brings is exactly what a freestanding birth center has on site, no different. The only difference is your home birth midwife, it's one-on-one, not a center of sorts that has a lot more rules and regulations that may not be based in wisdom, doesn't necessarily allow for the midwife to make her own decisions that allow for, I think we're okay, let's wait, let's pause, let the, in freestanding birth centers, they may have A, B, C, D, follow this. But it is a mistake to think that freestanding birth centers have more to keep women safe than home birth. Not. We bring with us what birth centers have on site. They don't have more.
Right. I love that explanation. Excellent. So if someone wants a home birth, how does insurance work? How do they pay for their home birth?
I retired 4.5 years ago, so I don't know how it is now, but there was always insurances that were better, always insurances that were worse, always insurances that paid more, paid less. Different midwives may ask for a certain amount of money out of pocket when the insurance isn't paying very well. Different midwives have their own policies. I will say this is a little bit of there are doulas making more money than midwives because doulas get out of pocket and they get their fees. A midwife may take the insurance that pays less than the doula is getting. And if the client doesn't want to pay anything out of pocket, there's a bit of a disrespect for what the midwife is doing because we are the ones who are really accountable. We are the ones that potentially can get sued. We are the ones who are responsible for mother and baby safety. And I don't think that a lot of women understand that. And more people know what a doula is than a midwife. So I've been asked many, many times when I say I'm a midwife, they say, "Oh, you're a doula?" And then I have to explain the difference. But it's insurance is tricky. I mean, I have worked, my career was long enough that I had insurances that were very reliable and I could get paid really well. And I had other times that it wasn't very good and we had to fight like hell. And sometimes, I was having to wait a year before I got paid by the insurance because my biller was fighting with them. And unless you have like a steady income, it can be very difficult to, pay your own bills. So I don't know that people really understand that. We want the women who are having home births to support midwives that are doing home birth and realize that they need to support home birth midwives so that it stays a viable option. And part of that is that the midwives get paid in a timely fashion, whether it's out of pocket or with the insurance.
Right. Excellent. If someone wants a home birth, do they need to have a certain kind of home, like space? Can they have a home birth if they're in a tiny apartment? Do they need to sterilize their home? How do they prepare their home? And what kind of home do they have to have?
I'd say they need to have a home. And their home is their home. And I have to remind people with small apartments or big apartments that when you're in the hospital, you're in a room.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with if you have a big apartment. You're probably gonna, when you get into active labor, kind of cocoon yourself in one little corner of your place. And it doesn't matter how big it is.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in studio apartments. I've been in big apartments, but the main thing is, I had someone who was had a very cluttered apartment. I said, you need to clear space. So it wasn't a big apartment, but she had to pick up and put things away. I didn't want to have to, try to lift my foot over stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Basic cleanliness is all that you need. Birth is not a sterile thing. Hospitals are not sterile places. Births in hospital rooms are not sterile. So clean,
Right.
a clean space. I mean, what's nice is that if you realize that your midwife may be, depending on how long your labor is, it's nice if there's more than a hard chair for her to have to sleep in if she needs to close her eyes. That, not that you're going to get a recliner for your midwife, but just, it is nice when there's something available. I guess there are some people that bring their own little folding thing. I never did that. I relied on my patients. So, but I've definitely tried to sleep on a chair. I've laid on the floor. It was rare to have someone who had like a room with like a bed or a sofa that I could close my eyes on, depending on how long the labor was.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. But I didn't choose my clients based on what their apartment was like.
A lot of people want to give birth in a tub or a pool. Do you tell me about how does that work? How does a baby come out under
They
water?
come out and you're underwater. And, I did not, there is a little myth, and I don't know if it's still going around, that as long as the cord is pulsing, the baby is getting oxygen and they can leave the baby underwater. And I don't think that's a great idea. I would bring babies out. Once the baby came into the water, I lifted the baby to the surface. But it can be in a bathtub, it can be in a blow-up tub, it doesn't matter. It's for the woman's comfort. It's a comforting thing. It's not a magical thing, it's comfort. We do that in life. You come home after a stressful day and you soak in a tub. It feels, and it's the same in birth. Woman has contractions and they're feeling tense and they're kind of resisting, and they get in the tub and they go, ah. Sometimes, however, the tub can slow labor down and they get so comfortable and labor slows, and sometimes you have to say, okay, it's time to get out. Let's bring it back again.
Yep. Yep. It's always hard when that happens. I feel bad. I just had a home birth and it's slow. She slept in the tub. We're like, oh no.
I mean, if you need to catch up on a little rest and there's no
Yeah.
rush, then it's good. But at some point, it's important to, get out. And some women don't like it. I've been with women who got in the tub and said, this isn't for me, and they get up and they prefer to be up. So it's a comfort thing, and it's a lovely comfort thing.
And what about the mess of birth? Like, how is that handled in a home birth?
Well, if we do try to protect the woman's bed, so we will say to have some kind of a plastic covering under her sheets and not use her favorite sheets. And then the birth kit that we usually have them get has like chucks, which are these, plastic pads, that disposable pads. So we, I did a lot to try to protect that. And then when the birth is over, we fold things up and toss it and everything is lovely. So I used to say, make your bed the way you want it, put the plastic sheet over it, put your not favorite sheet over that. We'll use the chucks. And then when it's over, we strip everything from the plastic sheet up and you have a clean bed underneath, Not that women all give birth in their bed. The midwife and the doula will clean up. We won't leave your home until it's tidy and clean. We don't let there be amniotic fluid and blood sitting on your toilet seat, We clean that and we help you clean. So once you've given birth and you're, kind of recuperating and you're ready to take a shower, we will make your bed. We will, be there to towel you off and make sure you have your pull up diapery thing. And, usually we will, if you don't have extended family there, we'll put up some food or tea or drink or something to make sure that you get some nourishment. And we leave when we feel that, the baby exam has been done. We feel the baby's good. We feel that you're good. You're both quiet. You're both settled. And you're ready to, breastfeeding has gotten started and you're ready to maybe close your eyes. So not to worry about cleanliness. And it's not as messy as you might think. People think, I don't want a home birth because I think it's going to be too messy. No, there's ways of containing that mess.
What about if she has children, like small children, medium children, older children? How does that work?
Well, first of all, it's up to the woman. Can she let go in a way that with her children around, or are the children going to be too demanding? We really prefer that you have someone who's responsible for the kids so that the woman is not having to kind of step out of her zone to be responsible for the kids. That said, if you've talked to the children and they're of a certain age, which could be fairly young, but you have to be able to talk with them with reason and explanation. Kids, it can be wonderful having children and make it a family affair. And I enjoyed having kids because I would talk to them if they were nervous or you could see mom is moaning or whatever, I would say, isn't your mom so great? I would make them think, and they'd oh, okay, yeah. And so they would realize that this wasn't necessarily scary, but it was something that was very cool.
Mm-hmm.
And, some kids wanted to get their head straight there and looking at it, and it was great. And I had no problem with that. But I have had kids that were very they were up past their bedtime. They started getting wild, jumping on furniture, things like that, taking away the energy from the mother, making it harder for me to concentrate. And I would have to say to someone who's responsible, you need to get them upstairs to their room. It can't be here. Because I want my being able to make assessments and keeps people safe is more important than your child being there who's being disruptive and demanding. If they can be part and, kind of hugged into the group, fine. And I've had kids who would step in, go into another room, do their coloring, come step in, go back and forth. So the kid was able to decide for themselves if they wanted to be there. I think one of the big mistakes is that sometimes people want their kids there and the kids don't really want to be there. And they're kind of, yeah, come, and it's don't do that. Let it be more an organic thing. Let the child reveal to you that they're ready for this. Do a lot of preparing for them, but, I had a long talk with my eldest grandson when his little brother was going to be born. 3 boys, but the first home birth. And we had a long talk about birth, and he was
5, 6.
4.5, 5. And he was really interested in it. And, you know, I think I asked him, do you want to be woken up to come to the birth? Yeah. Well, the birth was at night. His parents really didn't want him there, and he slept. And when he woke up in the morning with a new baby brother, the first thing he said was, is that my new baby brother? And the second thing he said was, you forgot to wake me up.
Aw.
And I heard that he now, as he's pushing 20, he still says that.
Aw.
So clearly that was impactful for him, even at a young age.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, the baby's so big now. So childbirth for a lot of folks can hurt a lot. What are the pain coping, managing, pain meds? Like, what do we do for pain at a home birth?
Well, we don't give medicine for pain. But one thing I have to remind people of, because word in the streets is that childbirth is so painful. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt. What I have said to people is, even when you have contractions every 2 minutes, and I use the way that a fetal monitor shows them. So it begins, it peaks, comes down, and it goes away until the next one. So the intensity of the contraction is the shortest time. And the time between contractions where there's no contractions, there's no contraction. So you are not in constant pain the entire labor. The most intense part of labor is the shortest part of labor, active labor transition. The earlier parts of labor, you can still talk, you can still, you might pause for a minute, but so if you think of it that way, you're not thinking, the pain of labor, let me have my epidural before the first contraction, and some women choose to elect to have a C-section, which I think is unconscionable, that the medical community thinks that choice in having a C-section should be allowable, because it is major abdominal surgery, and it should never be something that you just elect to have. But I think that there's a lot of fear around childbirth. Like anything that's behind closed doors, most of us have never witnessed it. So we just go with the stories that we hear. And, some of the stories are based on being left alone. A lot of women, my mother's generation, were left alone. And it's scary. And so, you're young, you've never been through this, no one's talking to you. Fear is always going to increase pain or perception of pain. So I think if you can be very much in the moment, I think if you're able to be in the moment, then you can literally fall asleep between contractions, even if they're every 2-3 minutes. I've seen women having contractions that close, and they snore when the contraction stops until it begins again. So be in the moment. Whatever you've learned in terms of using breath to help you relax, whether you do yoga, whether you're a runner, whether you are a weightlifter, find your breath. Have loving, supportive people with you, and don't anticipate what isn't there. Be in the moment, Don't think about the next thing. Let yourself go in that moment. One of the big mistakes a lot of people do is when they start beginning to feel like contractions are beginning and they realize they might be going into labor, the adrenaline gets going. And they, I might say, go to sleep, and they say, I'm not tired. And then they watch a movie. And then they put on a second one. And then they put on a third one. And then they are tired. And then they're exhausted, and they're not really letting themselves sleep. So when you're able to sleep, use it. We do have, I don't know what's new. I'm from my time. My home birth midwife mentee used to call it our magic potion. And we had an herbal mix of 3 different herbs that used to work like a shot of vodka. And it was beautiful. So someone who really needed to let go, and we gave them a shot of these herbs, they would sleep hard and often wake up in active labor. So there are some herbs. But if you want Demerol, if you want morphine, if you want an epidural, that's hospital.
Thank you. 2 of the other people we often have at a home birth, in addition to the midwife, is the midwife's assistant and the doula. Could you explain who they are and what they do at a home birth specifically?
Well, I will say that in my experience from back in the day, there was a period that I didn't have an assistant, and I just came by myself. But it is really nice if you have someone who knows your birth bag and knows how to hand you what you're looking for. So they have, some of them are, just trained by the midwife. Some of them have gone to some of these classes to train a midwife assistant, but I don't think that always, it's not an absolute. Different midwives want different things from their assistant. I knew someone who thought that she needed to take blood pressures as the assistant. I didn't want her to do that. You said assistant and what?
The other role is a doula. And what is the role of a doula specifically in a home birth?
Well, I think of doulas as a new profession, because when we lived in villages, the women of the village came to be with you when you were in labor, mother, auntie, sister. And because we live so separately and in nuclear families and far away from our families, a profession developed to support women in labor. But doulas, from my midwife perspective, is not a profession. It's a vocation. And it's women who know how to support women in labor. And they are hired by the woman to be their support. And hopefully they will go with them, whether they're at home or if they have to transfer, they will stay with them. Where the home birth midwife sometimes can or does and sometimes doesn't in the transfer process. Although the midwife should transfer with you, but sometimes they limit how many people can be in the room. They won't necessarily want the midwife there because the hospital doesn't trust that there's another professional there who they don't want any input from. I've had that happen where I transferred someone and the doctor prevented me from seeing the patient. And then, told the woman, your midwife, that she made her doubt me. And I wasn't allowed in the room.
Yeah, we usually come. I mean, I think I have in all instances I've come to if I had a home birth client and we transferred to the hospital, I would stay.
Yeah, of course, because you're hired to be their doula through their birth, wherever it is. There have been times that I've worked really beautifully with the doula, and I feel like it's a very collaborative kind of supportive thing, and we know our roles, and sometimes we support each other, and I've also had people who, because there's such a feeling of, protecting the woman in a hospital, unfriendly environment. I've seen doulas who do that at home, and I feel like that becomes a problem when they try to protect the woman against me when I'm their home birth midwife, and I don't want to have a conflicting relationship with a doula, when we're there. I don't think a doula needs to think, I got to protect the woman against their practitioner, which includes their home birth midwife. So I don't think there's a lot of like meetings between doulas and midwives to talk about our roles, and that doulas have their people that they get together with, and midwives do. So I have I've had doulas that I've loved working with, and I've had doulas that I get to the birth before them when I think they should have been there earlier.
Mhm.
They're telling me, well, tell me when she's active. And I already feel like I need to be there. Don't, I'm not going to think about telling you when she's active. You're her doula. You should be there when she needs somebody.
Mhm.
I've had situations like that, I've had doulas who the baby's out, we're waiting for the placenta, and the doula leaves. I don't think a doula should leave before the midwife. I think that we need to make sure that we clean up and everyone's okay, and that the doula is not thinking they can leave, and they just tell me they're leaving. They don't even think, so I'm hoping that doulas who are experienced in home birth understand this. Maybe there's some doulas that are not really experienced in home birth, and they're thinking about the way it is in a hospital. But yeah.
Thank you. How often do home births transfer to the hospital, and why do they transfer?
Well, I think this may differ midwife to midwife.
Mhm.
So some midwives like an example, long labor. Long labor is not a reason to transfer.
How long is long?
There's not a time attached to it. But if the labor is long and there's no change in the cervix, that's concerning. So sometimes women are just exhausted, or they might need hydration, or there's a lot of things that might add, or the baby's in a funny position, and all of those things that you think as a home birth midwife you can work with. But there should always be some progress. It could be a little progress, slower progress, but there should be progress. But if you check a cervix 7 centimeters, and 5 hours later 7 centimeters, 2 hours later 7 centimeters, something isn't happening. The baby might be doing fine, but if we wait longer, it's not necessarily means that you're going to have progress. So there could be many reasons for that. But it could be that the baby just doesn't want to come out, or whatever. Or it could be that the contractions need a smidge of Pitocin. So if the baby seems healthy and the heartbeat seems good and the mother seems good, and the main thing is, I'll give her time, and I'll say, okay, but in an hour, we've waited this long, but I think we need to make a decision in an hour. And I've had it work both ways. I've said we need to make a decision in an hour, and then all of a sudden she makes progress. And I've had people who nothing has changed and they're ready to go. So yeah, it's one of the beautiful things that you can't put everything statistically. These mother bodies and babies have not read the textbooks.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, sometimes things happen that are just such a magical surprise. And I've had, and I think every home birth midwife has had those.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, this is a long labor. Everyone's exhausted, pushing, you're trying everything. I remember I was saying, I think we need to think about moving to another, and the woman said, give me an hour. And in 30 minutes, the baby was out.
Mm-hmm.
I think that child is now 17 or something like that. But, I've had situations like that. And that's where the mother says, give me a little more time. I do, but then I might say, but we have to decide how long. And at that next time of making a decision, we have to make the decision. But, this is my way of practice. Someone else may be different. I have also known situations where people wait too long and there's a complication for the baby or the mother. They didn't know their boundaries. Then they should have, so yeah.
Yeah. It's gonna adjust my AC. I'm freezing. Hold on. It's too cold. Okay. Oof. So, and now on to us, on to me and you. So I've known you forever and I don't remember the first time we met. I don't know if you do.
Well, it was before you were born.
Yeah, so it's then.
So your grandmother and my mom were next door neighbors and very close friends and travel buddies.
Mm-hmm.
And your mom and I, who, crossed paths randomly through the years, did follow some similar trajectories in our early life. And then there was Java, and then there was you.
So she's referring to her son. I think we're like 3 years apart, 3 and change.
Your mom and I are 3 years apart, and you and Java are 3 years apart.
Right, right. And then our kids, his kids and mine are friends too. So it's 4 generations. His
My
kids,
grandchildren are friends with your kids?
yeah, they used to play. Not as much now, because like when my kids were kids and his kids were smaller, because there's like a 10-year-ish,
Well, my eldest grandson is going to be 20.
yes, so mine are now 23 and 26.
Right.
So back in the day,
My grandchildren are almost 20, almost 18 and 15.
crazy. Yeah, so they used to play. So that's 4 generations of our family. It's amazing.
That's pretty cool.
Crazy. So when they have kids, they're gonna have to hang out too.
And I think you came with me to one of your first, when you were thinking about being a doula, to one of the first births.
Well, you called me to come to work. I don't know if you recall. I had been to, I had 2 kids of my own. I had been to 2 births.
Oh,
I wanted to become a doula. I just hadn't gotten there yet. But it was a plan. And maybe you forgot, but you called me and was like, come with me. I was like, what? Yeah, you made me your assistant out of the blue. Yep. I was like, and at first I was like, I don't know how to do that. You're like, come on, come on. I was like, all right, fine, let's go. So I had some holiday time and a few weeks we ran, and then you said, go get trained, go get certified. I'll give you some clients, and you did.
but I don't know if you remember with these 2 earlier births, the first one that you came to me,
Who was
and
that?
the family didn't know you. I
Who was
think,
that?
I don't remember.
Right, okay.
The family didn't know you, but something was going on and we were trying to make a decision and you gave your input and everybody looked at you like, who are you?
Mhm.
So that's one lesson that probably people need to learn is where
Mhm.
where to be quiet and where to voice, where to earn their ability to voice.
Mhm.
Second one, We were at a birth. It was a little bit complicated relationship because she had a baby with a married man who happened to be there. But you, like all committed doulas, planted yourself right in front of her. And so you were like this.
Uh-huh.
The man was on the outside and, trying to find a way. And I think I whispered to you, this
Mhm.
said something like,
Yeah.
we're not that important.
Yes.
That
Yes.
way and get the couple together. And so you were able to get the couple into the shower alone together. And I think sometimes new doulas are so excited about how important they are to help because they love women and they help women that they don't always realize that, sometimes stepping in the kitchen and making tea or getting juice is what they need to do and get away from, whoever's there. So that was an interesting thing, but I see that as part of the growing pains of new birth workers.
I mean, I always say I got my real training through you, not through a 3-day course in a classroom, but going to births with you and you're in my ear and really explaining things, the nuance, the subtleties, the fine things.
That's what apprenticeship is, or
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. And like things like, I remember you told me like, just because you have your shoes off in someone's house, remember you're still at work. Because you get really comfortable and he's like, you're still at work. You have to like remember you're at work and you're not just, shoes off hanging out at someone's house as a friend.
That's a really big thing. Thank you. Because our work is so intimate
Mm-hmm.
and we probably work with people that could be our friends.
Yes.
We sometimes forget they're not our friends. We can be loving and warm, but they're not our friends. And we have maybe well after they've had their baby, you might decide to become friends, but you're not. That was a big thing for me is realizing, and it wasn't me as much as, but the women would think of me as their friend. And if I'm going to make life and death decisions, I have to be one step removed. I can't be in friend mode.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to have a little more clarity of thought, and that requires you to step back a little bit. So I think, and also, I was at a birth once with a transfer, and the doula came in, and the doula was so loud. The doula took up so much space. You're great. You're wonderful. Keep going. And I just wanted quiet because it needed to have and she was all about her. She thought that she was there for the woman, but she took up so much space. And that's part of the beauty of home birth is that know when to come in and know when to step back. Know when to say something and know when to keep your mouth shut. And I think that is really an important thing. Sometimes I've seen some doulas who have learned terminologies and things like that, and they sort of take on what I think is going over the bounds of their work to what is the work of the midwife. And I think know what is your role and know when you need to defer that is not your role.
Excellent. And anything else on birth you'd like to share and midwifery and home birth and birth?
I mean, I loved my work. It was also very much a vocation. It was you know, I say that I did what I loved and the livelihood followed, you know, but what brought me there was the love of women in birth. And it's not just crunchy granola. It's not just hippies. Everybody, corporate executives, physicians, attorneys, all of these, as well as, you know, artists and everyone can find their way to home birth and has. That said, yes, birth and is natural, but you know, it asks people to pay attention. And for the family, pay attention at the beginning, but allow yourselves to let go and not think too much as labor begins. For midwives, know your boundaries so you can make decisions, to know when everything is okay, to know when maybe you need to consider something else. And I won't say there's a global boundary, individually. Midwives, if you just leap into home birth, hopefully you've had at least a mentor or someone, because I think you're alone when you're doing home birth and you need some experience to be able to make these big decisions when you're at a home birth.
Right.
Either apprentice a home birth midwife or work in a hospital. You'll learn what you don't want and what might work, but don't just go into home birth without having had some type of apprenticeship, because you're not prepared for making every decision yourself. So, I mean, maybe there's some that are just that gifted and intuitive that they do, you know, but I wouldn't, as an experienced midwife, say that they should think that they can do those things.
Yeah. Well, with you, I always loved doing births with you. Always felt very safe because I really trusted you to know which calls to make, so I could just relax and do the emotional support thing.
Well, you were supposed to be able to just do emotional support. That's what your job is as a doula.
Exactly, but like when you're a doula, if you don't trust the care provider, you're a little on edge. You know, be it home or hospital. It's like, you know. But if I do trust them, I'm paying attention, but I don't have to have that hawk eye. I hear it. Like I hear the heart rate, I hear her blood pressure being called. But I'm not like, you know, I don't have to be Hawkeye on it. And I remember we had a birth that you said, oh, that was rough. And you're like, you got baptized today and we almost transferred, but we stayed home and it was fine. I was like, I'm fine. Because I trusted if you decided to stay home, we'd be fine. If you decided to transfer, we'd be fine. I was like, yeah, you had to have a stress. I was, whatever she does, it'll work out. And it did.
Yeah. I mean, I can't speak to doulas who come to a birth and they've never worked with me before. Do they have to be hawk-eyed on me? I don't think doulas have enough knowledge to be able to make that assessment. Is the midwife doing what's right? They don't have clinical training.
Right. Well, I had the advantage of coming in through you and joining a community of doulas where if I was going with any new provider, they could already tell me how they are, who they are, things to expect.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know that I really had anyone cold or blind.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
But I guess this is the midwife part of me feels like,
How would we know?
yeah.
I guess it's more, I think I've only done home births with midwives I feel comfortable with. So I would say more in hospital. And now I only do births with um OBs that I feel, you know, comfortable with too. But I would say back in the day, I had a birth and the mom wanted to be upright and the baby's coming down and she's progressing great. And her OB says, you can't give birth that way. Defies the laws of physics. You have to lay back. And I'm like,
So what
and
happened? She laid back?
it was back and forth. And like I was person, like, I gave birth twice upright. I've seen hundreds of people give birth upright. I also majored in physics, so it has nothing to do with that. It does not defy the laws of physics.
No, it defines the laws of physics of their body wanting to feel comfortable.
Right. So I think we got the recline at the end, but she had to stay upright. It's, things like that are tough. Things like that are tough
Yeah.
and hard as a doula. I remember bringing this one mom into the hospital. They put her on the back, everything stalls out. And they said, you have to stay in the bed. I'm like, I thought we were going to have this baby on the sidewalk. And now it's not even happening. And then she ended up having to have forceps.
I mean, when you say forceps instead of C-section, I think great, at least there was someone skilled in forceps.
Yeah,
Because now I don't even know if they use them, but it took
there's a few who do. That guy, I forget his name. He's still around. And then, Masali and what? Oh, I saw Masali the other day. He said hi.
to me?
Yeah.
Really?
Uh-huh. He says hello.
Did you mention me?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
So,
that's funny because I saw them, I don't know, a year ago at a Le Pain Quotidien in near Mount Sinai, and
yeah.
we were greeted each other and we're really happy and
Uh-huh. I do births with them a lot.
good. Well, just remember that I've been not practicing for 4.5 years, so there may be some differences.
Not really.
No, when I started, there were maybe 3 or 4 home birth midwives.
Mm-hmm.
And now, what are there, 30?
Yeah, I don't even know. I remember when I was new to birth, there were like 13. Then
Okay.
the majority of them are retired.
Yeah, there's a few couple of generations. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not my generation.
So my last question is, what are you doing now?
So I wasn't sure what to do after I retired, and I ended up thinking about chaplaincy. And I enrolled at Union Theological Seminary in the Buddhist interreligious engagement track. And I spent 3 years in seminary, and I did an internship in chaplaincy, and I graduated a year ago with a Master of Divinity. And then I didn't pursue chaplaincy again because it would take having a full-time job, and I didn't feel after 40 years of work that I wanted to get up every day to go to a job. So I'm now taking pottery classes and just came back from Kripalu with
With
mom.
my mom.
And I'm thinking deeply about what's going to be next to find meaning making.
Love that. Well, thank you so much for this interview. You're the best. You are a gem. You are a gift to the home birth community and the birth community in NYC. We love you. The great Marcy Tardio. The great Marcy Tardio.
I love you. It's not love you.
Yeah. Love you. I love you. But stay on the line. We're not hanging up.
Oh,
We're saying bye for the thing.
okay.
Bye.